In 1815, a single family knew the outcome of the Battle of Waterloo before every government in Europe did. They used that information to make a financial move that multiplied their fortune overnight and cemented their position as the most powerful private bankers on earth. That family started in a ghetto, in a single room, with a currency exchange business small enough that most historians wouldn't have bothered to write it down. 200 years later, the Rothschild name still controls one of the most influential financial institutions in the world, privately held, tightly guarded, and completely uninterested in explaining itself to outside investors or quarterly earnings calls. This is the story of how one family survived pogroms, wars, revolutions, Nazi looting, and 2 centuries of conspiracy theories, and came out the other side, still holding the keys. Stay until the end. The final chapter covers the one strategy the Rothschilds have used for 200 years that almost no other dynasty has ever successfully copied. It is hiding in plain sight. What city are you watching from? Write it in the comments. And if you're new here, subscribe, like, and share this video. It helps a lot more than you can imagine. The ghetto, the red shield, and the man who saw differently. It was 1744. Meyer Amschel Bauer was born into the Judengasse, the Jewish lane in Frankfurt, Germany, a walled ghetto where Jewish families were locked inside every night, forbidden from most professions, banned from owning land, and taxed simply for existing. The ghetto had one exit. Meyer intended to use it. He apprenticed at a banking firm in Hanover, learned how currency, credit, and compound interest actually worked, and came back to Frankfurt with something most of his neighbors didn't have. Not money, a mental model. He set up a small coin and currency trading business, changed the family name to Rothschild German for Red Shield after the sign above the family home, and began cultivating a relationship with Wilhelm IX, the Landgrave of Hesse-Kassel, one of the wealthiest princes in all of Europe. Wilhelm needed someone to manage his money discreetly. Meyer needed access, protection, and credibility. That exchanged discretion for access became the template for everything the Rothschild family would build over the next 250 years. Not leverage, not volume, trust, carefully placed, never wasted, never given to anyone who hadn't earned it. That was the product Meyer Amschel Rothschild actually sold, and it turned out to be worth more than gold. 5 sons, 5 cities, 1 network. Before he died in 1812, Meyer Amschel Rothschild did something that no banking family had ever done at that scale. He sent each of his 5 sons to a different European financial capital. Amschel stayed in Frankfurt, Salomon went to Vienna, Nathan went to London, Kalman went to Naples, Jakob went to Paris. 5 cities, 5 banks, 1 family, 1 set of rules. They communicated through a private courier network, faster than any government postal system of the era. They shared intelligence on markets, on governments, on wars before they were declared, and peace treaties before they were signed. They moved money between capitals in hours when competitors took weeks. When one brother needed liquidity, another provided it instantly, without negotiation, without interest charged between family members. The entire network operated as a single organism with 5 heads. In an era before telegraphs, before railroads, before any of the infrastructure that modern finance takes for granted, the Rothschilds had built something that functioned like a real-time global information network. Every major bank in Europe was slower. Every government treasury was slower. And in finance, being faster than everyone else isn't just an advantage, it is the whole game. Waterloo and the trade that built the legend. June 18, 1815. The Battle of Waterloo ended Napoleon's empire in a single afternoon. Britain won. The continent exhaled. Nathan Rothschild in London knew the result hours before the British government did, through the family's private courier network, which moved faster than any official dispatch rider. What he did next became one of the most debated moments in financial history. The popular legend says he deliberately sold British government bonds on the London Exchange, triggering panic among other traders who assumed he had received bad news from the battlefield. Then, as prices crashed, he quietly bought everything back at a fraction of the cost and made an enormous profit when the truth emerged and prices soared. Historians debate the exact details. What is not debated is this: Nathan Rothschild arrived at Waterloo financially and left significantly wealthier. And the episode cemented something more valuable than the profit itself. It cemented the myth, the idea that the Rothschilds always knew first, that they always moved before the market. That information was the actual product, and money was merely what it purchased. Myths, it turns out, are extraordinarily good for business, because people who believe you always know something they don't will always want to be on your side of the trade. Finance and empires. Ignoring borders through the 19th century, the Rothschilds didn't just participate in European finance. They underwrote it. They financed Britain's Napoleonic War debt. They funded the construction of the Suez Canal. They bankrolled the railway networks that connected Europe's economies for the first time. They loaned money to the United States government during the Civil War. They funded Cecil Rhodes in South Africa, whose mining operations became the foundation of what we now call De Beers diamonds. At one point, the Rothschild family held the largest private fortune in the world, and that fortune was simultaneously financing the military ambitions of governments that were actively hostile to each other. They were not choosing sides. They were above sides. That was the point. Here's the part that makes most people uncomfortable. When you are the only institution capable of financing a war, the outcome of the war becomes somewhat secondary to the terms of the loan. Empires borrowed from the Rothschilds because no one else had the capital or the network to move that kind of money across borders without losing weeks to logistics. The family became indispensable, and indispensable, in finance, means untouchable. Here's the question this chapter raises. Is there a difference between being financially brilliant and being morally neutral about who you do business with, or are those the same thing at that scale? Write your honest take in the comments. I read every single one. The century that tried to destroy them, the 20th century, hit the Rothschild family like a sustained assault from every direction, simultaneously. The Russian Revolution of 1917 wiped out banking operations across Eastern Europe. New governments across the continent nationalized private banks without compensation, and the Rothschilds had exposure in nearly every major European market. Then came the worst. When Nazi Germany occupied Austria in 1938, the Viennese branch of the Rothschild Empire, built over more than a century, was seized almost overnight. Louis von Rothschild, head of the Austrian house, was arrested and held for over a year before the family negotiated his release by surrendering virtually all Austrian assets to the Nazi regime. Palaces, art collections, industrial holdings, bank assets gone, transferred under duress to a government that had made the elimination of Jewish wealth an explicit national policy. The French branch survived the Nazi occupation of Paris, partly through strategic concealment and partly through luck. What's remarkable is not just that the family survived, it's that they rebuilt. Both branches, Austrian and French, re-established operations after the war. Not at the same scale, not without permanent scars, but the institution continued, the name endured, and the network that Meyer Amschel had designed to survive any single point of failure proved, again, that it worked exactly as intended. You cannot destroy what was built to lose pieces and keep going. The conspiracy industry they never asked for here is an uncomfortable truth about the Rothschild story that most financial channels skip entirely. For 2 centuries, the Rothschild name has been the centerpiece of some of the most persistent and dangerous anti-Semitic conspiracy theories in modern history. The idea that they secretly control governments, central banks, wars, and media spread through pamphlets in the 1800s, amplified by Nazi propaganda in the 1930s, and recycled endlessly across internet forums today, has caused real harm to real people who share the family name or the religion. It has been used to justify persecution, violence, and genocide. The actual history is damning enough without the fiction. The Rothschilds were extraordinarily powerful. They did finance wars. They did cultivate political relationships across every major government in Europe. They did build information networks that outpaced every competitor. But they were bankers, not puppet masters, not secret world rulers. Extraordinarily well-positioned, ruthlessly competent bankers who happened to be Jewish in an era when that made you a target, regardless of how much money you had. Separating the real story from the mythology isn't just accurate, it's necessary. because the myth was built to destroy them. And it nearly did. The modern empire nobody talks about. Most people think of the Rothschilds as a 19th century story, ancient history, gaslight and carriages, and Napoleon's Europe. They are not ancient history. Rothschild & Co., the modern investment bank that carries the family name, advises on some of the largest mergers and acquisitions on earth. In 2023, it was involved in deals worth over $300 billion in total transaction value. It operates in more than 40 countries. It employs thousands of bankers across 5 continents. It is not the largest investment bank in the world. It is not trying to be. What it is, and has always been, is the most trusted advisory firm for clients who need absolute discretion on transactions of enormous sensitivity. Hostile takeovers, royal family wealth management, sovereign debt restructuring, cross-border deals so politically complicated that most banks don't want their name near them. The Rothschilds don't chase volume, they chase complexity, and they charge accordingly. Alexander de Rothschild, the 7th generation of the founding family, runs the bank today. He is in his early 40s. He gives almost no interviews. The bank publishes no shareholder reports because there are no outside shareholders to report to. 200 years and same rules. Wine, art, and the assets that outlast banks. The banking operation is the headline. It is not the whole picture. The Rothschild family's total wealth is spread across assets that most financial analysts don't fully account for because they were never designed to be accounted for publicly. Chateau Mouton Rothschild and Chateau Lafite Rothschild are 2 of the most celebrated vineyards in Bordeaux and in the world. A single bottle of Lafite from the right vintage sells for tens of thousands of dollars at auction. The estates have been in Rothschild's hands for over 150 years. The family's art collection spans centuries and continents. Their property holdings across England, France, Austria, and beyond include estates, manor houses, and working farms that generate income independent of any financial market. These are not hobbies. They are the other half of the strategy. When markets crash, and markets always eventually crash, hard assets hold value in ways that financial instruments cannot. When banks fail, a vineyard in Bordeaux still produces wine. When currencies collapse, a Vermeer on the wall is still a Vermeer. The Rothschilds learned this lesson the hard way, watching Eastern European assets evaporate in the early 20th century. They learned it again watching what the Nazis took, and they built a portfolio that would never again depend entirely on the goodwill of any government or the stability of any single market. Diversification is a word financial advisors use. The Rothschilds invented the concept before anyone gave it a name. Why they will never go public, the question gets asked every decade or so. With assets worth hundreds of billions, with a brand name that carries 2 centuries of financial prestige, why not list? Why not take the bank public and unlock what could be an enormous valuation premium? The Rothschilds answer this question the same way every time. They don't answer it at all. But the reasoning is obvious to anyone who has paid attention to the family's entire history. The bank's value is not its balance sheet. The bank's value is the trust of clients who come to them precisely because their affairs will never appear in a quarterly earnings disclosure reviewed by analysts in New York and Hong Kong. The moment Rothschild & Co. becomes publicly accountable, the product changes. Discretion, the thing Meyer Amschel built the entire business on in 1760-something, Frankfurt, disappears. And with it goes the client list that makes the bank what it is. There is also something else, something more fundamental. A publicly traded company belongs, in a meaningful sense, to its shareholders. The Rothschild family has spent 250 years belonging to nobody. Not to governments that tried to tax them out of existence. Not to regimes that tried to seize what they built. Not to markets that crashed around them. Going public would mean, for the first time in the family's history, having to answer to someone outside the bloodline. That is not a trade they are willing to make at any valuation. The empire built on one word. Strip away the legend. Strip away the conspiracy theories. The Waterloo story. The 5 sons in 5 cities. The wine estates. The Nazi seizures. The private couriers galloping across Europe with intelligence that moved markets. Strip all of it away. What remains is one idea. One word that Meyer Amschel Rothschild understood before he had a single coin to his name, and that every generation since has protected with more care than any asset on the balance sheet. Discretion, not secrecy, not conspiracy. Discretion. The professional, absolute commitment to handling other people's most sensitive affairs without letting the world know the details. That was the product in 1764. That is the product today. Every dynasty we've covered on this channel built its empire on something physical: oil, cars, steel, algorithms. The Rothschilds built theirs on behavior, on a reputation so carefully maintained across so many generations that it became self-reinforcing. The more they kept their clients' secrets, the more powerful clients came. The more powerful the clients, the more indispensable the bank. 250 years of compounding trust. Think about what you are building in your own life. Not just the product, not just the capital, but the reputation. The one thing that survives market crashes, regime changes, and conspiracy theories. Because in the end, that is the only asset that cannot be seized, shorted, or taken from you in the night. Next video, we go inside the dynasty that built its empire, not on trust, but on fear. A media family that controlled what millions of people read, watched, and believed for decades. And what happened when the world finally stopped letting them? You will not want to miss it. It drops this week. Hit subscribe. It is free. And the next one might be the most revealing video on this channel yet. See you in the next one.